Thanks, Joe. And like every other speaker, Jesus Christ, how am I supposed to follow every single speaker that has spoken? It was amazing coming in here. Suki contacted me a couple of days ago and said, been asked to reach out to you. And I said, what about? And she says, would you come and speak at the Enough is Enough? And I was like, absolutely, 100%. I had a choice of going to Parliament this evening to watch a debate take place or coming here. I said, I'm coming here. And I'm so glad I did, seeing that queue around the block. And I have to say that anyone looking in on the United Kingdom cannot see today anything other than a failed state. When you look around Europe, in Spain, train journeys under 300 kilometers are free until the end of 2022. In France, energy bills are only rising by 4%. In Germany, it has cut public transport to €9, that's £7.70 a month. And meanwhile, we had a Prime Minister this week telling the people to go out and buy a new kettle. A new kettle. Telling people, and it's sometimes you look at it and you sort of laugh, and then you realize how sick, how inhumane, how barbaric these individuals are. And I want to rattle through some of the absolute utter nonsense that we've heard in the last few weeks as these Tory wannabe prime ministers have talked through a list of things that they all intend to do. They all, of course, say they want to talk about cracking down on violence. Well, for the Tories, there is no problem with violence as long as it's sanctioned by the state. Peacekeeping forces can go abroad and they can operate a policy of shoot to kill. Security services can engage in rendition and torture. Police officers in this country can restrain and kill unarmed young males. We supply barbaric regimes with bombs to rain down on the innocents. Forests can be burnt to the ground. Our seas are being ravaged. Our environment is being plundered. And whilst all the while, dissent, free speech, the right to protest, or the right to strike, they want to crush. And none of this violence is wrong in the eyes of the law as long as it is sanctioned by this government. And again, on the question of racism, apparently myself, my community, the black, Asian, minority, ethnic community, should be celebrating today because we have the most diverse cabinet ever in the history of this country, in the history of Europe. I watched Sajid Javid, the son of a bus driver, same as my father, a bus driver. I watched Rishi Sunak. I watched Cruella Braverman. I watched all the rest of them. Speeches paying tribute to their parents. All those brown and black members of the cabinet. They insult my parents' generation. They insult my parents' generation who gave their blood, sweat and tears when they were begged to come to this country and help to build it. And when we look for one brief moment in 2015, the images of the body of a 3-year-old Syrian boy, Aylan Kurdi, washing up on the Mediterranean shore sparked universal grief as millions demanded that we opened our borders. But the politicians within days quickly went back to demonizing human beings as illegal. And we should remember, long before Nigel Farage ever came on the scene, we should remember the policies of David Blunkett with his control of immigration. We should remember some 22 odd years ago, I remember as a young lawyer fighting for the children, 3 or 4 children incarcerated with their mother behind barbed wires in Dungavel. The amount of times that we have been told that Dungavel was shut, but it's still open. It's a scar on our planet. It's a scar on the planet of Scotland. And we should remember long before Nigel Farage, a racist European border policy has turned the Mediterranean into a sea of blood, drowning tens of thousands of refugees fleeing war, poverty and climate catastrophe. We are ready to bomb countries, to prop up dictators, to open the gates of help, but we're not willing to help those escaping the fires, hungers and wars that we cause. And of course, I see a real difference. In 2015, we were told by all our leaders, by the tabloids in this country, that we had a migrant crisis when 1.4 million Syrian people wished to flee persecution, torture, rape, starvation, chemical bombs, bombs from the sky, unexploded devices taking their limbs, tearing their children apart. And we were told that we couldn't accommodate them. But within days throughout Europe, we accommodated 2 million Ukrainian refugees. And I asked the difference. We all asked the difference. All people of colour asked the difference. What is the difference? And I, for one, don't deny the right of the Ukrainian people to come to this country. We should open our borders to them. We should do for them the same as we should do for the Syrian people. But I'll tell you this, it wasn't a migrant crisis. It was a racism crisis that we had. And I'll also say this, never mind the Tory party, there are those in parties that are supposed to be on our side, who are supposed to be on the side of the workers, who believe in the working class movement, who claim to follow Labour Party traditions, who follow Labour traditions. They should know damn sight better. But they say, they claim, some of those, that we must help our own first. And what I say is, if socialism means anything, it means nothing if we do not respond to the plight of the political prisoner, if we do not respond to the plight of the hungry children, if we do not respond to the plight of the homeless refugees, the deaths in police custody, the pensioners unable to heat their homes, the workers unable to put food on their table or keep the roof over their head. If we deny our humanity, we betray our own. And that is what we should always remember. And I just briefly want to touch on the case of Sheku Bayo. Sheku Bayo was a young black man, 31 years old, who came from London, came from Sierra Leone when he was 11, lived in London, and his sister, who lived in Fife and Kirkcaldy, decided that it was safer for her brother to grow up in Kirkcaldy, so he travelled up to Kirkcaldy. He was part of the community. He had 2 young boys, Isaac and Tyler. Tyler is now 11, Isaac is now 7. On the 3rd of May 2015, the police received reports of a black man walking down the street acting erratically with a knife. 6 police vehicles were detached, sent to the scene. Within the space of 30 seconds, just under 30 seconds of the first police officers arriving, Sheku Bayo was face down on the ground. Before those 30 seconds of him being face down on the ground, he had been CS sprayed as he walked empty-handed towards the police. Empty-handed. No knife in his hand. No knife ever found on him. No knife found in his pocket. Not wielding any knife. But he was CS sprayed. He was powder sprayed. He was battened. And when he was on the ground, he was handcuffed. He was leg cuffed. He was ankle cuffed. And when they made the deal, which some of you will have seen on the footage during the public inquiry, they talked about him being the biggest black male they had ever seen. How they were terrified. We asked the question, 2015, what was the size of the police officers attending? Because it was a detail that was constantly missing. And then we found out in the months that passed that the first 2 police officers who attended were 6'4" each and weighed 25 stones each. There was up to 6 police officers on top of Sheku Bayo. Over 50 separate cuts, lacerations and bruises and a broken limb. Within a space of minutes, he stopped breathing. And within minutes, he was dead. He was taken to the hospital. And his family have fought now for 7 years to get justice. And they ask the question this. They ask it of all the Labour movement. They ask it of all the political parties. They ask every one of you, and they plead with you. If you carried the hashtag Black Lives Matter, if you marched when Black Lives Matter during the pandemic, if you cried tears for George Floyd, Where is the tears and the marches and the demonstrations for Sheku Bayo? And I'll put this out there, because I know the Scottish Police Federation like to watch every word I take publicly, so that they can drag us down, they can bully the family, they can try and harass them. They have not succeeded. And it's a slogan I made many, many years ago, after 1998, when Surjit Singh Chokha was murdered. In 1999, we set up the campaign to fight for justice, and there was one trial, and the killers walked free. And then we campaigned again with the backing of the STUC and many of the trade unionists who I see today, who were at the heart of that campaign. And it took 17 years to get justice for that family. And the slogan we raised was, the dead cannot cry out for justice. It is the duty of the living to do so. And what I would say to you is this: on the 16th of November, the Sheku Bayo public inquiry will begin again in Edinburgh. We want that square outside filled up with demonstrators, with protesters, with activists, whichever side you're on. We are building a movement. We are building a movement that connects these issues, whichever walk of life you come from. And as I'll turn to Liz Truss now, like every Tory before her, she claims she wants to build a land of opportunity for all. You cannot build a land of opportunity for all on the ruins of 5 million children living in poverty by the end of this year. And we will not take lectures about the irresponsibility of wage rises from billionaires, the bankers, the energy companies, the very people who have nearly destroyed the UK economy through their unrestrained greed. No matter how many hours families work, they struggle to put food on the table. Child mortality is on the increase. Suicide rates spiral as people are driven to despair. And if you want to talk about that United Kingdom after Brexit and all the rest of it, the United Kingdom is a rogue state in which the free market is only for the poor and socialism is for the rich. That's how their free market works. Where a person on a salary pays more tax than the global pirates who threaten the future of entire nations from their £100 million yachts. What disgusting human being came up with a cowardly plan to offshore people fleeing persecution and war 5,000 miles away in Rwanda in a dirty cash for people plan? And as for the Tories, I'm going to start winding up. As the Tories talk about in the last few weeks about being tough on crime, the Tories in this country lock up more people per capita than anywhere else in Europe. Super prisons are being built for the anticipated rise in crime. £4 billion has been put to the side to build some 6 prisons with 20,000 prisoners will be held in. Be prepared. Those prisons are being built for the poor and what we will face in the days and the weeks and the months ahead. Our prison system kills you a little bit every day. Crushing dreams, breeding bitterness, rage and frustration. And I know a case I want to mention you of a boy for whose family we have fought for the last 4 years. William Lindsay, 16 years old. 4 years ago, the system couldn't find him a place in a children's secure unit. So the sheriff, in his wisdom, decided to send him to Polmont's Young Offenders Institute. The social workers screamed, "Do not let him go. He is suicidal." He had been in and out of care some 19 times since the age of 3. He had attempted suicide some 8 times prior to prison. He took his own life despite the warnings within 48 hours of the arrival at Polmont Prison. We are still fighting for justice for William Lindsay. And in 2017, the cost of a place for a child in custody ranged from £75,000 to £210,000. The annual fee to have sent William Lindsay to Eton would have been £40,000 a year. Locking people up in dungeons of despair doesn't rehabilitate anyone. It institutionalizes violence, it dehumanizes people and it alienates them. And it really doesn't matter. I think people have come to realize that. Who is in power at number 10? Because for millions of ordinary people, nothing changes as they get poorer. Despite the millions who are enduring the sharpest rise in the cost of living for 40 years, Britain's super wealthy have grown their combined fortunes by a record £710 billion in just 12 months.
According to the Sunday Times Rich List, a golden era for the super rich has continued unchecked. This is their paper that's describing them. There is a record 177 UK billionaires, 6 more than there was last year. And the economic crisis has nothing to do with ordinary workers. It has nothing to do with the cleansing workers, nothing to do with the teachers, nothing to do with the rail workers, the benefit claimants, the illegal immigrants, the Eastern Europeans, or any of the scapegoats that suits the Tories of the day. Austerity is about punishing the poor for the mistakes of the rich. And today, what I say is this launch of Enough is Enough must be about the future of our country, of our children's future. At its heart, it must be about whether we put people before profit, about whether we send people to die in illegal wars. It's about a publicly owned health service. It's about looking after our old people, about the ending of poverty, the ending of ignorance, the ending of inequality of opportunity. There is only one thing that is inhumane, racist Tory government fears, and it is the power of the working class. And that power rests in every community, in every town, in every city, and it's time our movement united. Only last year, in July, I remember going to Kenmure Street. Friends from the asylum community asked me to come down. And I remember going into the back of the van, and as I arrived at the place, it was Eid that day, and I took my kids down. I was saying to people beforehand, my kids are wizened up now. I was able to take them when they're 6 months old, the toddler and all that, to demonstrations. But they could use it, they got the chance, they were like, Dad, it's Eid, why are you taking us to a demo? I went, no, we're just going for a wee wander through Pollock Shields. We got there, and there was about 1,000 people, and the chants kept coming through. These are our neighbours, let them go. These are our neighbours, let them go. And I remember going into the back of the police van and saying to the police officers, senior police officer, thank you for Mr. Anwar for coming. He said, well, you've got 2 alternatives. I said, well, what do you think? What do you think we should do? And I said, well, the first alternative is release these men into my custody, give a guarantee that they will not be arrested within the next 24 hours, that you will allow to march, the crowd will be allowed to march up to the local mosque, and then your police officers will disperse from our community. And they said, well, that's not possible because of the Home Office, because of Priti Patel's van having arrived there on the day of Eid. And they said, what's the second alternative? I said, second alternative is you must have at least 200 police officers there. You have horses, you have vans, you have batons, you have shields, you have seer spray. Send them in. Batten everyone to the ground. Use your shields, use your violence, but you will be picking up the pieces for the next 20, 30 years. And what happened within a space of 2 hours was the police took a decision under public safety that the priority was to release those 2 men, and we marched to the chants of these are our neighbours. We defeated Priti Patel, and that carried a wave. So I'll conclude by saying, up and down this country, meetings are taking place like this tonight. The prevailing mood may well be pessimism, but contained in these halls is the collective memory of the trade union movement across the decades. And that memory is not just about defeats, but it's also about the struggles that we won. We need to learn the lessons of the past. The writing is on the wall. We know what will happen if we do not unite. We know what will happen if we don't put aside our sectarian differences. We must also be prepared for the vicious attacks and smears that those in the front line will face, not just from the right-wing media, but from those liberal lefties, from those armchair socialists, from those red Tory hypocrites, the same ones who had the audacity to go for Eddie Dempsey, a lifelong socialist and anti-fascist. And this message should be loud and clear. If you come for one of us, then you will have to deal with our movement. We will defend our own. We will defend our people. So, enough is enough. We need collective action on the picket lines. We need our trade union leaders to organise and coordinate the strike days so that the whole country starts to shut down. We're not allowed to call it a general strike, but you can coordinate strike action on the same day. We need solidarity to raise money for workers who cannot afford to go on strike. We must make sure that they are not broken, that they win, that they take inspiration. We need to detonate a mass movement. We have to organise. We must be prepared, as many have said before, for the fight of our lives. People aren't prepared to suffer anymore. We cannot wait. We cannot wait until the desperate, the poor are negated as human beings. Power rests with the people, and it's time to bring down this barbaric Tory government to its knees. Thank you.